Hi everyone, so I am almost better, but not quite good enough to be back yet. So we have one more day of flipped notes, and my hope is to definitely be back tomorrow. So let's get into today's notes. If you notice, the title says A, B, and D practice workshop. So starting today, we're going to be learning how to work with A, B, and D all at the same time. So for this video, there's going to be 3 examples, and then the rest of the time is going to be for you to practice. Homework will be to finish the ones that we don't do. If you notice, it's just one page back and front, so this shouldn't take you too long. You should be able to finish it by the end of class. So homework shouldn't actually be this worksheet. It'll be one that just has you practicing A and B. So taking a step back to just A and B. So classwork is finishing this worksheet. Homework will be the other handout. It actually says 4.4 day 3 at the top. Excuse me. Alright, so let's get into number 1. The very first thing I recommend that you do is, 1, realize that D has played a factor because we see a vertical shift. Also decide how long till I get to this final tick mark. So if we're counting by a half, this is a half. This will be 1, 3 halves, 4 halves, which is 2. So I realize I'm going to have to do something about B. And then, is there a change to A? Well, to see that, we need to determine where the midline is. So if you haven't gotten your markers yet, please press pause, go grab some markers. So here's my midline. I'm going to put it in red to make it more obvious. Midline is at 2. Excuse me, -2. Then I look where my high is. That is at 1. And my low is at -1, 2, 3, 4, -5. So half the distance of the wave, excuse me, half the height of the wave is 1, 2, 3. So that's how I know A is 3. Let's calculate the period. I know period will be 2 pi over B. The graph gives me the period. It shows me what does one full period look like. It takes till a value of 2. So I will set this equal to 2 over 1. Let's cross multiply. We get 2b equals 2 pi. 2 times b equals 2 pi times 1. Solving for b, we'll divide by 2, divide by 2. B equals pi. So I've got A. To find A, I sketched the midline, the high, and the low, and I asked myself, what is half the height of the wave? And whether I look here or here, 1, 2, 3, no matter what, it was 3. To find B, I used my knowledge that period is 2 pi over B. I set that equal to what the graph showed me is a full period, and I solved. By definition, from yesterday, D will come from the midline. So this is my D. To know whether or not this is sine or cosine, we have to recall that in general, sine of x looks like that. And cosine of x looks like that. So which one is closer? Well, the one that's closer is sine of x. And the reason why I say closer versus match exactly is that here, sine of x starts at 0 and goes up. This is starting at the midline, which is kind of like our new 0, but it's going down. So it means that we have a reflection. Excuse me. So to put together our final equation, it's going to be f of x equals negative a. So negative 3 sine of, we found b to be pi, so pi x minus 2. And we're done. Let's apply this same process to number 2. So we're going to look for a first, then b, then d. You could do any order you want. Just alphabetical seems to be nice. So let's first sketch our mid, high, and low. You do that and I'll do that and we'll see if we match. Do we match? I have my mid at 2, positive 2. The high is at 4, and the low is 0. So what is A? What is half the height of the wave? A is 2. Half the height of the wave is 2. The distance from 2 to 4 is 2, or 0 to 2 is 2, whichever way it's easier to see it, it's 2. Now let's talk about B. To figure out B, and this is a lot like the quiz we had, we're given the first tick mark, we got to get down here by ourselves. So I see this is counting by pi over 3. So I know that this is going to be 2 pi over 3. Yep, so pi over 3 plus pi over 3 is 2 pi over 3. This will be 3 pi over 3, which is just pi. And then one more is 4 pi divided by 3. Notice the denominators did not change. I saw some people doing that. Adding thirds, it still stays a third in the denominator. It's the numerator that will change. If this first tick mark had been 2 pi over 3, we would have gone 2, 4, 6, 8. We're counting by ones though, so 1 pi, 2 pi, 3 pi, 4 pi over 3. So this is important. This is my period. The graph is telling me the period is 4 pi over 3. We're going to use that to help us solve for B. So period equals 2 pi over B. We know that. We also know from the graph that that has to equal 4 pi divided by 3. Let's now solve for B. Cross multiply. So I'm going to continue to do this quietly up here. You please, on your paper, solve for B, and then we'll see if we match. Okay, I got a positive 3/2. Is that what you got? I hope so. If not, check with a neighbor. Compare your algebra to mine. We'll see if we can figure out what happened. But now that we have A and we have B, we just have to decide what D is. Once more, for emphasis, where does D come from? D comes from the midline. So if I look at my midline is at a positive 2, so that's D. Like down this other one, midline was at negative 2, that was D for that graph. Now we have to decide, is it cosine or sine? So coming over here to our parent functions, does this graph look more like sine or more like cosine? I'm hoping we're thinking or saying to ourselves cosine, and I would agree. because it looks very much like cosine, except it's reflected. Notice how cosine starts up here and comes down. This graph starts at the low and comes up. So this is a cosine graph that has been reflected, which means our function is going to be f of x equals negative a. So negative 2 cosine, find where your b is, 3 over 2, x, close it, midline, plus 2. Because the midline gave me d. That's why it's really good to box final answers, because when you go to build this this equation, it's nice if you can just look, okay, a is 2, b is 3/2, d is positive 2. So if you box your final answers, it'll help you keep track of your work. So in general, to know whether or not it's sine or cosine, guys, sine, especially if there's a vertical shift, it's not going to be at 0. Nothing will be at 0 or 1 if there's a vertical shift. Sine, almost always, 99% of the time, starts at the midline. So if I look at number 1, the starting value was on the midline because that kind of becomes like the new x-axis, so to speak. Whereas cosine, if I look at number 2, cosine, because this was reflected, it's starting at the low. If it hadn't been reflected, the starting point would have been at the high. Either way, though, that's not the midline. That's either the high or the low. Let's do one on the back. So if you notice here, it says sketch one full cycle, label axes. I am not given the graph. I need to graph it. And I clearly can see here that we have A, B, and D in play. So take a second and think, which one are we going to do first? Are we going to deal with A, B, or D first? The answer is D. We're going to do D first. So I'm going to go 1, 2, 3, and sketch the midline. Next, are we going to do A or B? Correct answer is A. We're going to use A to create our high and low. So this got us our midline. Using A second, so that this means first, this means second. We're going to use A to get our high and low because, and this has to get extended a little bit for us, I know A is half the height of the wave, right? So if I go up 2, that's going to make my high. And then from the mid count down 2, that's my low. I don't mean to make this look like a -3, so I'm going to erase that one. Labeling the axes, this is 3, this is going to be 4, 5. 3, 2, 1. Last but not least, we will use B to calculate period 2 pi over B. So let's do that together. I know period is 2 pi divided by B. What's B for this graph? Or excuse me, this equation. It says 3/4. So we're going to do 2 pi divided by 3/4. When we know we don't divide by fractions, we multiply, keep, change, flip, right? So keep 2 pi, change to multiplication, flip 3/4, and that becomes 4/3. Multiplying straight across, we get what? 2 pi times 4, 8 pi. Invisible 1 down here, you can write it if you would like. Times 3 is 3. So I know this is my period. Which means, if I create 4 nice, evenly spaced tick marks on the x-axis, by the time I get to 8 pi over 3, I should have 1 full period complete. Let's figure out what we're going to count by. Count by, you can either divide by 4 or multiply by a fourth. Because we're starting with a fraction, I think it's easier to multiply by a fourth. Either way, you'll get the same answer. That's 8 pi over 12. If you simplified first, it would come out different, but let's just say I just multiplied straight across. That does simplify, though, to divide both by 4, divide both by 4, we get 2 pi divided by 3. So that's what we're going to count by. If that's the right number, I'm going to put 2 pi thirds here. We're going to count by 2 pi over 3. If we did it right, we should get to 8. So 2 pi over 3, 4 pi over 3, 6 pi over 3, 8 pi over 3, we did it right. We're now ready to sketch. Once again, this is where it's important. So for sine of x, right, off to the side, I'm just going to jog my memory. Normal sine of x starts at 0, comes up, goes down, comes back to the x-axis. But we're no longer starting on the x-axis. Our x-axis has become the midline. So I'll even put a little note here in quotes. New x-axis is the midline. So sine will start on the midline, and then from here, it's easy sailing. Follow this motion. Starts here, goes up, because we have no reflection. See, there's no negative. So from here, we go up, come back down to the midline, go down to the low, come back to the midline, and we're done. And that's how we graph with A, B, and D. So looking at the timer here, this video took a little less than 20 minutes, which means you have a solid 25 minutes to go back and work on the ones we did do on the front and the remaining 3 here on the back. You should hopefully be able to finish most of it by the end of class. And then, like I said, homework is going to take a step back and have you practicing just A and B. So leaving D out of it, a little more practice on A and B. I'll be available after school on Remind only, so my apologies, guys. Those of you who are going to stay today, we're going to have to make some alternate arrangements. But I'm very positive that hopefully by tomorrow I will be back. So hope these notes went well for us. And again, please reach out on Remind with any questions. And hope you guys have a great day. Bye.